What if the South had abolished slavery first? What if the American South, the land known for cotton, plantations, and slavery, abolished slavery before the North? What if it was Southern leaders who called for liberty, dignity, and freedom for all, black and white alike? What would that America look like? Would there have been a civil war? Would racism take a different form? Or would the South have become the moral center of a very different United States? This is the alternate past we're exploring today, and it will challenge everything you thought you knew about American history. In our real history, the South became synonymous with slavery. Cotton plantations, enslaved labor, and a deeply rooted racial caste system shaped its society, economy, and politics. When the North began pushing abolition, the South doubled down. That clash led to the Civil War, the deaths of over 600,000 Americans, and the long, painful road toward emancipation and civil rights. But what if the story flipped? Imagine this. It's the early 1800s. Instead of defending slavery, Southern leaders recognize the moral and economic poison it brings. They see that dependence on forced labor is unsustainable. They fear rebellion, instability, international shame. Influential Southern thinkers like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, both slaveholders in reality, instead lead the charge to end slavery in the South by the 1820s. Slavery is gradually phased out, not through war, but policy. Enslaved people are emancipated, land reform is introduced, and former slaves are given citizenship and education. It's imperfect, it's slow, but it's bloodless. The South reinvents itself. Here's where things get wild. The North, which industrialized early and profited off textile mills fueled by Southern cotton, suddenly looks less progressive. Northern factories still exploit cheap labor. Racist attitudes persist, even without the visible brutality of slavery. Now Southern states become moral voices on the national stage. The narrative flips. They push for civil rights. They demand labor laws. They call on the North to clean up its system. The South, once seen as backwards and brutal, becomes a model for enlightened reform. With slavery off the table, the core conflict that tore the country apart never happens. No Fort Sumter, no Gettysburg. Abraham Lincoln may never become president, or if he does, it's in a world where emancipation is already reality. Instead of spending the 1860s tearing itself apart, America could have focused on expansion, innovation, and healing. Black Americans, free decades earlier, gain access to education, voting rights, and land. The systemic racism we know today might look entirely different or be dramatically reduced. Would Jim Crow even happen? Would segregation ever rise? In this new timeline, formerly enslaved people and their descendants are not pushed into second-class status. They become landowners, politicians, writers, teachers. They help build a South that is racially and culturally rich. Cities like Atlanta, Charleston, and New Orleans become centers of black excellence earlier than in our reality. The Harlem Renaissance happens in Charleston. Martin Luther King Jr. may not need to march for basic rights, but he might still rise as a moral philosopher in a more united nation. Now imagine how the world watches. The United States becomes the first major power to abolish slavery peacefully, led by the South. That shakes empires. Britain and France face pressure to follow suit faster. Brazil, Cuba, and others might not hold on to slavery as long. The U.S. becomes a global symbol of moral courage, an example of reconciliation over war. Fast forward to today. In this alternate America, the South is not haunted by Confederate statues or racial tension rooted in slavery. It's seen as progressive, multi-ethnic, and proud of its role in ending human bondage. The Southern drawl isn't associated with division, but with dignity. The Confederate flag never flies. Monuments celebrate abolitionists, not generals. Instead of being a region struggling to reconcile with its past, the South becomes the heart of the American ideal. Now let's ask the hard question. Could the South have actually done this? In reality, slavery was deeply embedded, economically and culturally. Many leaders feared emancipation would destroy their wealth and power. But there were early Southern voices, religious leaders, small farmers, and even some politicians who saw the writing on the wall. If those voices had gained power just a few decades earlier, maybe, just maybe, the South could have changed the course of history. What if the South had abolished slavery first? We might have avoided a war, saved hundreds of thousands of lives, and built a more unified, just country far earlier. It challenges our assumptions, but that's what history does best. Because sometimes, the wrong path was never the only path. We just didn't take the better one. If this alternate reality made you think differently about America's past and its future, make sure to subscribe. Hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. What moment in history do you wish had gone differently? Let's imagine a better past, to build a better future.